entertainment, current events, and Hollywood. Don't miss Creator to Creators, hosted by the filmmaker Meosha Bean, known for the Shudder hit documentary Horror Noir and the acclaimed film Anatomy of an Anti-Hero, Redemption. This show features interviews with filmmakers and creatives from around the globe. Join the fun with guest celebrities and gain valuable insights. Subscribe now and follow Creator to Creators.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Creators to Creators today. Today we have a special guest.
I am Keith Arem. I'm the CEO of PCB Productions and PCB Entertainment here in Los Angeles.
I love that. I love that. So I really love going back to the beginning. I always say at the beginning, chart our trajectory in life, our little habits that we pick up along the way kind of follow us into our adulthood. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was that like? And how did you find your way into doing all the amazing things that you're doing now?
I grew up out in Arizona and I think it was probably out of sheer boredom that I just wanted to keep myself occupied. I had a love of everything from writing and artwork and music and movie effects. And I love motion pictures and films and comic books and games. And I just loved all that. And I think being a product of my generation where there just wasn't a lot to do. And I was, very active and going out and doing things and in life, but I just really wanted to just be a creative and a storyteller. And so I had a band that I had started when I was maybe about 14 years old. And
Amazing.
we hooked up our computer to a synthesizer and started doing covers of stuff. And I was in like a school, like an early, like a talent show, and we won first place. And that was like all the encouragement I needed. You're in front of a crowd of people and you're performing and you're like, oh, that's must be like in the music industry. And so then I started a band, and then suddenly we were on the radio and we're on television and we were playing, twice a week. And I'm 15, 16, 17 years old touring. And so then I said, well, maybe, I could get into the music industry and have a record deal, and not knowing that, that was going to be in my future. And so I ended up moving to California, and then it just snowballed from there. I got my first record deal when I was a freshman out here in college. And my parents are like, wait a second, this music thing was just supposed to be a fad. It was never supposed to happen. You got to get a business degree. You got to do something else. And so the moment I turned down my first record deal, the industry thought I was playing hard to get. And that turned into like, bidding wars and other things. And you start learning about the business really fast at that point. And so my senior year, I called my mom and I said, Mom, like, we got a record deal with Sony and Capitol and Interscope. I'm taking a record deal. I said, I promise I'm going to graduate, but I'm going to get this done. And so that's what I did. And I graduated, and the day I graduated, I was in the studio and just started to tour and got into the music industry.
Wow. And, and it's amazing that I think that's super incredible, like to be so young to just say yes to all that. Would you say that you've always been fearless, a person that's just like, why not? Let's just go for it, even though you don't really know exactly what it's going to be or entails?
You kind of have to, because when you know how brutal the industry can be, and I think that if you just start saying no to things right off the bat, now it's healthy to say no in a sense of understanding your boundaries and contractually, and supporting yourself and making sure that you're not making bad decisions. And it's interesting being an artist to say no, because if we had a bad business deal and I said no, then you're kind of perceived as like, well, that's a diva, because, oh, well, the artist doesn't want to say it. They're just, but the same, negotiation with a business manager or a lawyer, they're like, oh, well, that's really good business. And so a perception that an artist or a creative doesn't understand really good business is really challenging. And so the relationship you normally see with an artist or as a creative is that you always want to say yes to everything. And then you want to have some really big, support behind you to be able to really negotiate and make sure that you're being protected. But at the same time, you don't want to take that power away from yourself. You don't want to have your livelihood and your dependence on someone else. So I think that in this industry, you have to educate yourself to a point where you have to know, if what you're getting out of a relationship, and if it's a exposure or marketing or distribution or something that's there, you're going to pay for it in one way or another. So you have to kind of be aware that what your career growth is going to be and where you want to be years down the road, and is it worth taking a questionable deal to get one of those things now, or is it worth turning it down? And that's the
Mm.
constant struggle that we always fight, is like, what's a good deal?
What's a good deal? That's absolutely that's very true. Because I mean, you really just never know. But I love that you bank on yourself, and that's what you said. That's what it takes. And yeah, I mean, you've done so much with like through different like span multiple creative fields that you've done. I mean, films, music, video games. How do you approach blending storytelling across different mediums like video games and like, graphic novels and films?
I think you have to tell the right story for the right medium. And at the heart of it, it's just good storytelling.
Yeah.
But a linear medium like a film is a much different experience than an
Mhm.
interactive one where you're getting to change the events of what's happening. And so as a result, your storytelling is different. Your discovery of the characters and the world and how you kind of explore those is different because you're giving agency to the viewer or to the
Yeah.
audience. So if you're sitting in a theater and you're watching a film, it's very much like being in a virtual reality experience, in a sense that even if you did or didn't have interactivity, the idea that you're completely enveloped in this giant space with no distractions, nothing else around you, and you are
Yeah.
completely focused on what's in front of you. And that's why I've always loved films. And I think that's what the promise of virtual reality was trying to do. The flip side is on the game side is that you have that agency. You change the narrative, you change sort of the story, or at least theoretically have the ability to do that. So as a storyteller, you have to tell it from a different perspective, because now you have to discover these things. They aren't being fed to you. You have to make them happen.
Mhm.
And the same thing in music. Music is a linear experience, but at the same time, you are relating to it from your taste and other things, that your influences are there. So
Mhm.
as you start to bring in visuals and live performance and music and other things, the way you are as a creator starts to evolve, and how you tell stories. And so for me, I just love telling stories across all different mediums. And sometimes I
Okay.
realize I have a great story, but it won't work for film, or it won't work for a video game, or it won't work for mobile or VR, but it might work here in a comic book,
Yeah.
right? And so you
Yeah.
start to realize that maybe the world is great, but maybe this chapter is told in a comic, or this one might be told through a video game, or this one might be better for a film. And that's as a result of the industry and where the audience is and where you are as a creator and what you want to, create.
I love that. I love that. I mean, you have some like your resume is like absolutely immaculate. Um, you have some of the most iconic video games that you've done, like such as like Call of Duty, I mean, just Saint Row, I mean, just so many things. But what was it like directing, for that talent for these massive projects? Like, I wonder what that was like.
It is the best experience just working with these creative just giants in all these different games, because what you're doing is you're bringing together all your friends. You're bringing together
Yeah.
people that you really admire, and each of them brings their own personality and their own creative storytelling. And as a director, my job is to really guide the ship and say like, hey, we're sort of all going this direction,
Yeah.
and you'll have someone like Gary Oldman, who is just one of the most phenomenal actors in the planet. And you have to tell Gary, you're not teaching him an act. You're not really giving him any acting guidelines. You're basically saying, hey, we're going over here. We want the character to be this way. Right.
Yeah.
And then the other cast we're bringing this way. And so as a result, you're kind of weaving together these performances with a consistency and a continuity of those
Mhm.
performances that's there within this great world. Because these video games are collaborative worlds that have design directors and narrative directors and art directors and mocap directors, all these different people that are all kind of working in their different specialty crafts. And when you're working with actors, our job as performance directors are to like pull that performance and find the glue that brings together the gameplay and the story and the narrative and everything that's there. And then obviously then we have dialogue and facial
Yeah.
capture and all these different performance techniques that we have to kind of Frankenstein these performances to make them seem very realistic. But you really need great people to work with, and people who are just excited to, work outside of this crazy technology box and try to create, good stories.
Yeah. Speaking of technology, that's one thing I love seeing is like just like where it's going, like especially video games. It's absolutely like unreal how realistic it looks now from I used to play a lot of like Dreamcast, Nintendo. I was around that era, PlayStation, and it's just like every time I see these new games, it's like, whoa, like I saw Alan Wake. I played that game and I was just honestly just blown away of just the technology is insane.
Yeah.
How do you feel with just, everything's how it's moving, where we're moving towards technology wise?
It's continually getting better. I mean,
Yeah.
the resolution and the immersiveness of everything, not just in the visual side, but just the level of gameplay and the ability to kind of get into these worlds is improving by the minute. And it's interesting. We would go to E3 and some of these big conventions every year, and everything would kind of look the same. And you would
Yeah.
get kind of numb to it. You wouldn't realize how much we've actually progressed. And then you step back a little bit and you look at the difference of where it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and you realize how much it's actually progressed. And, on one part, there's the storytelling and there's just like great characters and great writing and great development in the performances that's there. And the other side is the visuals and the immersive side of things. And I think that there's been this equal balance between amazing performers coming in the industry and bringing these great performances and how beautiful these worlds are getting. Even if you look at like the last stuff from GTA that were, the sneak
Yeah.
peeks that's coming out, and even older games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and some of these other games, like they were already setting the bar to such a tremendous height. And you've got God of War and Last of Us and all these
Yeah.
other games where they're starting to bring these big narrative features up. But now you've got the processing power of some of these new, video rendering engines and the graphics cards. And I think that the artists are at that level where, it's getting so photoreal that you're going to
Yeah.
get, I know it's been kind of funny in years past. People always say, "Oh, this is photoreal. It looks just like a photograph." And you look back on it, and you're like, "No, that really doesn't." But it really is getting that close now. I think it's getting to the point where, you've seen things with deep fakes and other things with some of
Mm.
the AI rendering stuff that you really can't tell the difference. And I'm sure 10, 15 years from now, people would look back at it and probably laugh, but it's getting to the point right now where it's getting scary, scary real. And
Yeah.
I think as an immersive, you know, gamer, I think people are really going to find that the next level of games is going to get really exponentially better.
I love that. Can you share some of your most like memorable like moments like working like Activision or Sony? What were some of your most memorable moments?
So many good games. I came in on the end of Tony Hawk 1, and I did all the stuff for Tony Hawk 2 and did all
Nice.
the sound effects. I recorded all the skateboards and all the stuff with the pro skaters, and we went all around Los Angeles and everywhere with a backpack and the skateboard. I still have it, and it's just thrashed with all the microphones we were putting on it and doing stuff like that, and just being so irreverent, just trying to get these really great grounded sounds to make that happen. And Tony Hawk 2 was, one of the first things that I was really proud of. One of the first games I ever directed the talent on was a game called Toonstruck, and I worked with like Tim Curry and David Ogden
Nice.
Stiers and Christopher Lloyd and all these other great like big actors of their day, big comedian actors, and working in animation and learning, just watching these amazing performers and learning to be a better director just by watching these actors act and perform, and understood how to communicate with them. Um, and over the years, I got from doing music and sound effects, because I did a lot of early games like Earthworm Jim and BattleTech and Metal Arms and other games, and then got into sound design, and then got into directing the talent for all these games like Call of Duty and working with the performances. And so it's been this evolution where I think most of the most memorable moments are the moments in the studio where, you've got an actor or someone that you admire or someone that you grew up with watching. And, I got to direct, people like Burt Reynolds and
Wow.
Hulk Hogan on
Incredible.
Saints Row, or I would, work with someone like Gary Oldman or Ed Harris or Sam Worthington, and guys, that you admire for their work in film, and then you get the chance to work with them in the studio. And Idris Elba working on Modern Warfare
Oh, I
was like
love that guy.
professional, amazing actors to work with. And so you start to realize that like sometimes just being in the presence of an amazingly talented performer or creative and just being around their energy and learning from that makes you just a better creator and storyteller.
I love that. That's really cool. So I love asking this question, and there's no wrong answer. But the three levels of influence: money, power, and respect. And if you could choose only one of those things, which one would you choose and why?
100% respect, always. Because money and power will always come, but like, we have a saying in our family that the person that's nice to you but not nice to the waiter is not a nice person. And
Mm,
and the thing is that we're all equal. Everyone's equal, no matter where they're at in life. And to give that equal respect to someone, no matter what stage of life they are, because they might just be starting out their career or in between things or anything that's there. And money and power, they'll always come, and it's all relative, right?
it's
Power
true.
over what, or money is all relative to what makes you happy. And money is not the thing that's going to make you happy. It's really going to come down to, being confident in who you are and what you want to do, and just being content with what you have and what you want to do. And if it's monetary or power, then, those are fleeting, and those are always going to change based on so many other variables. But having that respect and having that integrity and having that determination and faith in yourself, that's going to be more important than anything. And all those other things will come. And, and we all go into life and out of life the same way. And money and power really don't play too much of a part of that. But respect and the admiration of the people around you and being able to coexist with those people is more important than anything else in my book.
I love that. That's a great answer. Great answer. That's awesome. Obviously you've worked with so many people, but is there anyone on your bucket list or someone that, you know, say in a perfect world, if you could sit down and have a coffee with any legend, living or dead, in any genre, any form of the creative field, who would it be, and what question would you ask them?
Wow. I think there's two in my book, and I've come very close to meeting with them, but just because of different things from different times, I'm friends with everyone around them, but that we haven't connected directly. I think for me, between Spielberg and Cameron, like James Cameron and Steven
Mm,
Spielberg, um, mainly for the fact of is that I very much relate to them in the sense of utilizing technology and creative tools to further better performances and finding out how to get the humanity out of a performance, but still in the world of maybe filmmaking or using technology to do that. And so to give them any one question, that's a really good question. I don't know what I would ask them. I think that I would ask kind of the same questions you're asking me, and almost like, how do you get started? But I think that most of the people in this industry, they kind of find their way.
yeah.
Like you try things and you never give up and you're persistent. And it's nice to have validation from other creatives to realize that you're not alone and you're not just doing it in a vacuum, that there's other people that are trying just as hard as you are. And you might be frustrated and you're like, I'm doing everything right. And why isn't this happening? But then you
Yeah.
realize it's not you. It's just to say to the industry or where things are at. But it's nice to look back on your life and you kind of look at the things that you've accomplished and you're like, oh wow, you get to do some really fun things and you have some memorable kind of things. And sometimes in the moment, I think it's hard to appreciate those
Yes, very
moments.
true.
And I think that's the one thing that we would all do ourselves a great service is to kind of live in the moment a little bit and
Yeah.
appreciate the fact that, life is fleeting. I think, COVID probably woke all of us up to that point that maybe life
Oh
is
yeah.
shorter than we think.
Oh yeah.
And you have to do things in the present. And so as the economy and politics and other things have kind of, vacillated over the years, I think if you're a creative or you're a person that enjoys what they do, you just have to find something that makes you happy and constantly appreciate it and do what you're doing so you're not dependent on anyone else for your livelihood.
Absolutely. I was wondering that question. I love, and I absolutely love everything you said about that. I love some of the listeners that listen to this show. They love hearing of like, how does one do it, right? Obviously, everyone has their own path, their own journey. But at those times of like you're not sure, it doesn't feel like you're getting your work out there because it's so saturated, right? Like
Yeah.
just we're constantly being bombarded with information. And it's like, whoa, who do you listen to? So what advice would you give to those up and coming or people that are in this industry trying to find their way?
It's an interesting thing because it's a constantly moving target, and there's no right answer at any one stage because things evolve and change, and taste levels change, and the economy changes. But the one thing that doesn't change is creativity and the ambition to do things. And the idea that you're going to create at any level is all that's important, right? Whether you're doing a comic book or a graphic novel or a motion picture, you're still creating.
Yeah.
You're doing an album, if you're writing, if you are acting, if you are performing, you're still constantly actively performing and growing your craft and your creativity. And so I think that there's a burnout level that people get very frustrated when they have an expectation that might not be
Mm,
realistic. And when they don't hit that expectation, that kind of people start to burn out. They get a little resentful towards that. And I think that's where I see people give up. And I think
mm.
people think that they're not good enough or that their work isn't good enough. And I've had so many friends that are amazingly creative people that never release anything. They just keep saying, well, it's not good
Wow.
enough. It's not good enough. And their stuff is amazingly good enough, but they are
Mhm.
just in their mind, it's not there yet. And so as a result, they keep reworking and reworking and reworking. And I think that's the curse of all artists is that artists is like, no great work is ever finished. It's just
Yeah.
abandoned, right? And you can always keep noodling something and keep reworking it and doing that. But there also has to come to a point where you have to get stuff out, no matter what the level is. Now, it
Mm,
obviously has to be commercially viable. It has to get to a certain level where you, as a tastemaker, or has to be above the audience's expectation. Because if
right.
you put out stuff that's just not commercially viable, then people won't usually come back. But if you know you're good and you're doing great work, put something out there even early in your career, but get stuff out there that shows a body of work.
Yeah.
And then you constantly understand the process of what it's like to get all the way out there. And good or bad, whether it's commercially successful or not, I don't think is necessarily the only solution. Obviously, people are looking for big hits and those unicorns where somebody gets a giant, they've never done anything, all of a sudden they get a giant. But the truth is, it's more
Yeah.
for the aggregation of working and working your entire career and doing all of these projects make you a better creator, and you have experience and you learn from things. And in my opinion, the moment that you stop learning is the moment you start dying, because you're not moving forward at that point. And you can't just say, well, on the last project we did this and I already know all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, I think there's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be someone learning and changing and growing. So you just have to constantly improve yourself and constantly keep reinventing the wheel. But you can't give up. You just got to be persistent and be, determined that you love what you do, and you're not doing it because of the money or the power. You're doing it because you genuinely love the craft of that. And if you're a good business person and you make yourself, in good deals, then hopefully, you can sustain yourself and support yourself and your family that way. But you have to love what you're doing at the heart of it.
Absolutely. 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 I love everything you said. I'm just listening like, yes, yes. Um, uh, I mean, gosh, there's so many questions, but the time is going down. But have has there been moments in the journey that you've kind of ever questioned it at all, or you've never questioned the journey?
I think you have to question it all the time to reevaluate it and make sure that you're
Really?
making decisions. Because even if you love something, sometimes it might be a bad situation. The timing might be wrong. It might be a bad deal, and you have to distance yourself from the love of what you're doing, from the business of where it's at sometimes. And I have found that sometimes I've worked on projects that I am so in love with the project and the people I'm working with and everything that's there, but either the timing is wrong, the industry is wrong, or there's just something that's keeping that project from being successful. And that doesn't mean giving up on it. It just might mean now's not the right time.
Right.
And so I think you have to, as part of a healthy sort of evaluation, is kind of, constantly look at things and question it and say, am I doing the right thing now? And even though I love this part of it, is it holistically a really good thing for my career or for this project or for the people I'm working with or my family? And if it balances and everything is good, then absolutely. But
Yeah.
if you're hitting resistance, sometimes just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. And I see a
That's
lot of
true.
people from time to time do things where, like, yeah, sure, we did this and we had this money, we did this, and it's like, yeah, it's not a good idea. So,
Right.
um, so I think that's why you have to be very honest with yourself and making sure that you're making good decisions. And a lot of times it's things that are out of your control. There's so many
Yeah.
things that happen where, whether it's nature or economy or politics or other things that affect things.
Yeah.
Um, and the industry can just turn on a dime. And even though you're working on something, someone else could come out with something identical or rip you off or
Yes.
do something. And then all of a sudden you're defending, a great idea, but the timing's wrong. So.
Mm, timing. It's very true. How do you stay balanced? What do you do outside of like just to, because I'm sure you're working so much. What do you do for yourself? What does that look like to stay balanced? And
Reset constantly,
that's
constantly.
good.
When I'm in heavy production, I travel. I schedule it like it's a client, and I'll get as far away from everything I can for a short amount of time. Doesn't have to be more than 7 or 10 days, but I'll just take some time off. And if I'm heavy production, yeah, I'll try to do it like 6 times a year, and
Wow.
basically every other month, just take some downtime and get completely out of your familiar surroundings and reset.
I
And
love
now
that.
what I've been doing recently because of travel and other things is I'll do shorter breaks, but more frequently. Every
Nice.
other week, I'll take off and I'll go to the mountains, or I'll be bike riding, or I'll go somewhere else where I can completely get out of the studio and away
Love
from
that.
everything that's there and just not have to focus on my email and my phone and internet and everything else. I can just focus more on my family and
I
myself and
love
everything else.
that. I love that. I can't, so are you working? Obviously, I'm sure you're working on something amazing, but is there anything you can kind of share with us? Anything that you have coming up that you are working on?
The big thing that we're excited right now is next week I'm going to launch my first Kickstarter on my own for a new
Oh,
graphic novel called Frost Road, and it's this
interesting.
sort of apocalyptic horror graphic novel that I created with Christopher Shy that we did our first book together, and it's kind of a fun experiment to see how we can work in the graphic novel space independently using Kickstarter as a way for the fans to crowdfund that. So that's
Amazing.
going to launch next week on March 4th.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That's really, really exciting. Super
Yeah, it's going to be
exciting.
fun because I think it's a new era right now of creators starting to have new platforms and things like Kickstarter have been around for a bit of time, but I think now there's a great time for creators to actually get involved and do stuff.
I love that. That's exciting. Well, I think it's super cool to see like people get involved. Like, I did a crowdfunding for a project called Church Hurt. I just finished it actually, but working on it's an audio series, and I was actually surprised of like how many people have been church hurt. Like it's not just my story, but it's everyone's story. So everyone was like, "Oh my God, I have this story." I was like, "Whoa!" Like I was very surprised. But it's cool to see people get involved and wanting to be creative. I love that part of
That's
creative.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, also, where can people find you on social media to follow everything you have going on?
Sure. So our website is pcb.cc and also pcbproductions.com. That's our studio side and also our original content. And then on socials, it's at PCB Productions and at PCB Entertainment.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Do you have a saying or quote that stays with you like in tough times? Like one of your favorite quotes that kind of keeps you going?
I don't know if I have a favorite quote. I mean, people always joke that I always say that sleep is overrated because I'm constantly working on 24 hours a day, but sleep is not overrated because you need sleep. No, I think probably the one phrase that we use in our family the most is we win or we learn. And that's kind of how we do stuff. It's not about winning and losing. It's just like if you don't get it, then you just learn from it. And that's kind of how we do it. So and I think in our family, we always truly want to be passionate about everything that we do, and everything is a learning experience. So if you don't figure it out, then you just learn from it.
I love that. I love that. On that note, thank you. Thank you so much again. And thank you all for listening. And always remember to live, love, laugh. We'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Take care.